Welcome to Coping Together, Mental Health Association of Central Florida's live web series dedicated to helping you develop coping strategies and wellness tools related to COVID-19, as well as talk about mental health. Coping Together was created in response to COVID-19's mandatory social distancing orders. This show seeks to learn and educate. We do not speak for any particular group. Overall, Coping Together serves as a platform through which we can demystify and unpack mental health concepts and hear from experts in the field. Please note that this show may discuss sensitive topics, including but not limited to sexual assault, suicide, and various traumas. If you find yourself feeling upset or struggling during any episode, listen to your body and pause the input. We will post related resources. Remember, it's okay to get help.
Good afternoon. I'm Marni. I'm the president and CEO of the Mental Health Association, and I welcome you to this edition of Coping Together. Today, our speaker and guest is Liv Sain. I'm excited to welcome her. Hi, Liv. Nice to see you today.
Hello.
Welcome to Coping Together and to sharing your story. So to that end, let's just jump right in and tell us a little bit about yourself and share with our audience and the members that are watching today your origin stories and what brings you to this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. So again, my name is Liv Sain, and my story starts back in 2012, actually. I actually lost my father suddenly and unexpectedly to a heart attack at the age of 23 years old, which really forever changed my life. And, following his loss, I lost 4 more family members.
Wow.
And then I got kicked out of college at one point because I was grieving. I wasn't mentally stable at the time. And it was actually a year ago when I finally hit my rock bottom. Some type of rock bottom. And mine was in October of 2019. I'm going to get a little graphic for you, if that's okay.
That's okay. We want to hear the real story.
Good. That's good to know. So I just moved in my first apartment. I was so excited to finally be on my own. And one of the things I struggle with the most is alcoholism. And I was drinking very heavily every day, and I was alone a lot. And I was also in a very toxic relationship at the time, which did not help me mentally.
How young were you, Liv? Liv, let me just jump in and ask a couple of questions for myself and for your story. How old were you when you first started drinking that you realized that it had gotten to the point where it was a considerable issue and an impediment?
Before the age of 23, I had drank a little bit, but I never drank every night. If I were to drink one night a week, it'd maybe be like 1 to 2 drinks. And it wasn't until my dad died that I start drinking heavily, and the grief was just unbearable. And that's when I started drinking a lot.
Gotcha.
A lot.
Okay.
And then it turned into hard liquor, and I just never really, I took breaks every now and then, but I was in denial for most of those years. But I didn't see it was a problem. I thought I was just kind of decompressing. I thought I could handle it because I was a functioning alcoholic. And that can get very confusing with people. Or I'm able to keep a job, so therefore I'm not an alcoholic. Or I don't have a record, therefore I'm not an alcoholic. So anyways, I was drinking very heavily on my own when I lived in my first apartment, and I drank so much to the point I started getting suicidal thoughts. And I remember one night, I actually was standing in my kitchen, extremely depressed, not wanting to be here. And I was gazing at my block of knives in my kitchen. And I remember pulling the largest and the sharpest knife out, and I held it up to my neck. And all I wanted to do was take my own life. And I was drunk, of course, because I felt like I had to use that to summon the courage to actually want to take my own life. But at the same time, I was also crying because I knew, I don't think I can do this. And in that moment, which a lot of people who are struggling, I think you can relate to this, they just want the pain to stop. And for me, I wanted to find peace. But I believe the only way to find peace was to rest in peace, as sad as that is. So how did I move forward from that? What changed for me? Well, I was honest with my mother. She was the closest thing in my life, and she still is. And I believe honesty really is our saving grace. I not only was honest about it to my mom, but I accepted the fact that I need help. And I entered treatment 2 days later. And I finally found the missing piece of the puzzle. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder that went undiagnosed for 31 years. And I think a lot of people who have bipolar can relate to that too, because it is so hard to identify, because it can mimic so many other illnesses out there.
When you received the diagnosis, was there, how did you handle that? Because I have a very good friend who, at a similar age, had a similar occurrence happen and was hospitalized and received her diagnosis of bipolar disorder. She had a very hard time adjusting and accepting the diagnosis. Did you have similar experience?
You know, the difference with me is I had been going to, because of I have other health issues that I've gone through since I was a little girl, but I have always gone to a doctor. I've always gone to a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. I mean, I'm a firm believer in therapy, so I'm always in therapy. So for me, I always knew something wasn't right with my brain. I just knew it in my gut. And I knew the way I was reacting with people, how I was in relationships, how I was with friendships, how I reacted with family. I just felt like there was something not right here. And unfortunately, no one could pick up on it. And it took a treatment center to see it, because they obviously saw me 24/7. But I was relieved when they told me that. When the doctor said, I think you're bipolar, I honestly was like, yes. Not that I wanted bipolar, but I was like, I finally found the answer to my problem. Yes, it had a name that I could attach it to. And I got to be honest with you, being diagnosed with it every day, but it's all about how you manage bipolar disorder and finding that balance. With life, it's all about finding the right balance.
So, you know, I know a little bit about your biography, and so there were other diagnoses that were going on, like you've shared, where, you know, you've had a lifetime of working within therapy and opportunities to share. So that's a lot to take on at 31. Even with finally saying, you know, wow, and now I know what to call this, you know, this brain health issue that I'm having. Where were you at that point, and how were you reaching out for support?
So it's funny. I was just talking about this with my mom today. I was just talking about, you know, it'd be so nice to have bipolar disorder, because it is very lonely. It can be very lonely, especially if you don't know anybody who has it. Honestly, I don't know anybody who has it that I'm close to. I just deal with it, and I talk to my therapist about it. And you know, my family puts up with me in my relationships too. But you know, it can be very lonely. But I really have learned to kind of deal with it on my own. I think over the years, just because it was so lonely with depression and alcoholism and bipolar disorder and having Tourette syndrome, I think I kind of got to the point where I just almost got a little used to it, unfortunately. But I had to be my own advocate. That's the thing. And everything that I went through kind of made me become a self-starter. It kind of helped me be independent and figure things out on my own, because, you know, we are only advocates. And, you know, when I was diagnosed with it, I didn't take no for an answer. You know, that's another thing. I just kept pushing and pushing. And if I heard something from a doctor that I just didn't really agree with, it was my job to seek out another doctor and see if maybe there's something else out there, because finding the right treatment center, finding the right therapist is like finding the right relationship. They don't all work, but you find that one, it can be your saving grace.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you're hitting on a really good point that I'm sure many listening today can relate to, which is how to develop those self-care, self-advocacy skills, right? Mm-hmm. Takes a level of believing in your own resilience.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to tip off what we're going to talk about with the Tootsie Roll. I'll let that come for Tootsie Pop.
There you go.
I wonder if you can, it sounds like your family origin helped you have those self-advocacy skills, but that's not always the case for a lot of people.
Right.
What could you share with our audience today about how those self-advocacy skills might be able to be activated, or what are things that that individuals can look to for support around themselves to activate that resilience muscle?
You know, I would say too, especially if I'll start with school. If you're in school, you're in college, you know, the one thing that I learned later on was I went to UCF, and I had no idea that they had resources for those who were struggling mentally. And they had a whole even program, whole building dedicated to those who even have addiction. So if you're in school, I would highly recommend reaching out to your school, to even your guidance counselor, whoever it is that you're close to, and finding out if there are resources there.
Yeah.
Even in your community. I mean, look at the Mental Health Association of Central Florida. I mean, I discovered you guys, I mean, years ago, even when I was struggling with myself, and I had a relationship that, unfortunately, my relationship was with a heroin addict, and I was trying to get her help. And I remember coming to you guys, and that they introduced us to the Outlook Center. So you never know who's going to introduce you to those things. It's really a matter of researching, doing your own research, being your own advocate, and reaching out to the community to seeing what types of services and resources they can offer you.
You know, I think you're bringing up really a great point, which is take a small first step, even if it's really small, like reaching out to the association and our resources here, or a friend, or somebody that you're connected to at school, or what it is. But take the step, I think, is the moral of the story here, because that's the most critical thing, is to go one foot in front of the other as you develop that. So in our household, oftentimes what happens with individuals, and we hear this a lot at the association, is that the moment someone comes forward with recognizing or saying out loud that they have a behavioral health care condition, that automatically makes people around them maybe respond differently and act differently. And it makes maybe yourself feel differently. Can you talk about how your experiences there were or weren't of that nature, and maybe how you overcame that?
Yeah, so just so I'm understanding clearly, so when I was diagnosed, is it your circle of influence and how kind of different it was, the reaction from people?
Yeah, and you know that we talk a lot about how to overcome stigma. You know, our motto here at the association is it's okay to help.
Absolutely.
But it's so hard to convince people to take that first step. I'm curious how you helped yourself. Yeah,
absolutely. The hardest thing is really reaching out to people you know, and I'm guilty of that, you know. I just remember when I hit my rock bottom, I had friends reaching out to me, and they're asking me if you were okay, and I lied, and I was like, I'm great. And I think there is something about people you know that make it harder. I don't really know why that is. You'd think we would reach out to the ones we love, but it does make it harder for the people that we do know. But what really helped me was kind of getting to that point of, this is becoming unacceptable to me. That's when I changed, was knowing my behavior is becoming unacceptable. And not only am I noticing dysfunction in my drinking, but I notice life would be better if I wasn't here. That's when I knew I'm becoming a little delusional. I'm not in touch with reality. I know that something needs to change. And the only way to change that is, like I said before, is really accepting that problem. And the only way to remove stigma is not only talking about it, but actually doing something differently about it. And moving forward, what I've learned the most is, in order for change to happen in your life, you must do something differently every day, even if it's one thing, even if it means I'm going to tell one friend today that I've been struggling. Because chances are they might be feeling the same way, and maybe they're alone, and maybe they don't feel like they can speak up or have a voice. But you might be surprised as to how many people really are feeling the same way you are. Because I actually remember going to this concert, and I don't know if you've heard of To Write Love on Her Arms, but it's an amazing organization that raises awareness for addiction and mental illness. And there was an event they put on every year, and everyone walked in, every single person that attended wrote down what they were struggling with. And when you looked at the board, you realized, oh my gosh, we all have more in common than we think. We really aren't alone.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, you know, as human beings, our conditions are so similar. And I think that sometimes we get in our own way because we think we're so unique that people couldn't possibly relate to the experience. So you've taken, let's jump ahead a little bit and share with the audience. I had the opportunity to listen to a recent TED Talk that you have created and out there. Can you share a little bit about the TED Talk and maybe share a little bit about the elements of the talk? Because I think
absolutely,
the perspective is just really so awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Yeah, absolutely. You know, that was one of my things I wanted to do. It was on my bucket list, was to give a TEDx talk, and I got that call a couple months ago, and I got through the next round, and I did this talk, but I had to come up with a concept that was unique. And I wanted it to be about suicide prevention and mental illness, but I was thinking it's such a hard topic to talk about already. How can I make it fun? How can I make it so people can actually digest that kind of information? So believe it or not, I came up with a Tootsie Pop as an example. And I wish I had it with me. I meant to bring a Tootsie Pop, but I was like, going to show everybody, because you know, having the visual makes a big difference.
Well, we just have to imagine we're all holding one.
Imagine a Tootsie Pop. So I came up with the Tootsie Pop, and I basically had used it as a metaphor for life and solving life's problems. And because when you look at a Tootsie Pop, you've got that hard outer shell, but you also have that chewy center, which is the best part. That's the whole reason why you started to lick a Tootsie Pop. But I teach people to look at the chewy center as a solution to their problems. You know, it could be mental illness, it could be addiction, it could be grief, it could be loss, it could be self-love, it could even be finishing college, finding the right career path, you name it. The list is endless. But the hard outer shell is the part we have to break through, and that becomes our struggles. So I have 5 lessons I actually teach people on how to reach their chewy center.
Can you share those?
Yes, absolutely. So the first lesson is to select your flavor of change you would like to make. So that is really all about, excuse my French, but you know, shit does happen, but change doesn't. And in order to be that change in your life, we really have to think about what can we do differently every day. You know, whether that means forego that glass of red wine, or replacing sweets for a workout, or replacing self-negative talks with self-love. So think about just one thing you could do differently tomorrow. And the second lesson is to unwrap the problem, which is the hardest part. You know, and that can go down to even talking about what you're going through with someone you love, someone you're friends with. And so that would be number 2, becoming an unwrapped version of yourself. And in order to do that, you must not only be honest, but you must accept the problem in order to move forward.
Really good.
And the third lesson is to lick your way through the hard outer shell of resistance to that change. So you got to lick your way through in order to find your chewy center. And the fourth one is to expose that soft, chewy center at the heart of the change you want to make. And in this process, you have to dig through that hard outer shell. That's when you find your chewy center. And that's when you save your inner core. And that's when you preserve the real you. And the fifth lesson is to repeat steps 3 and 4 until you reach your chewy center. And the beauty of this part is you've already put in the legwork, or in this case, the lick work. You already know what to do. You already know what works, you know what doesn't work, but it's important that you are repeating what you've repaired. You know, you have to make sure you're not repeating bad behaviors or bad patterns or bad choices. You have to make sure you're not surrounding yourself with the same types of people. So those would be my 5 lessons on how to reach your chewy center.
That's just incredible to to have evolved to that level and to utilize something as universal that we all love as a Tootsie Roll Pop, but it is so specific, and it is just amazing because, as you pointed out, you know, we have that hard shell, and that it does take getting to the center, which is sometimes the hardest because that's exposure, that's risk. That's where we're at our softest and maybe least protected, and that's also probably the scary more element of being the most frightened about the change and moving past it. So really, so I know you had a TED Talk this weekend at the university. What was the response?
You know, it was good. Unfortunately, you know, it was virtual, so I didn't really get to have that full experience on stage, but you know, it worked out for the best. You know, I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason, and I think it turned out, I was so happy with it. I finally reached a point in my life where I could look and say, I'm proud of what I did, you know, and that's hard for us just to admit, but I got to the point where I was very proud that I was able to overcome that, given where I was just a couple years ago, you know, really wanting to end my life. And then I find out later, life did turn around. Life can get better. And that is something I want everyone to know, is feelings do not define your destiny. Life can get better.
I think that's just an incredible message for everybody to hear, particularly at this time where we find ourselves really trying to hang on to hopeful moments when there are things around us that maybe aren't as hopeful as they once were.
Absolutely.
One of the things, you know, believe it or not, we've come pretty quickly to a half an hour just having this conversation. I'd love to keep talking more, but I do want to give you an opportunity to share, what is Butterfly Talks?
Oh yeah, Butterfly Talks. So I started Butterfly Talks several years ago. I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and at the time when I came out, I was looking for that support, and I was looking for that community of people that I really had a hard time finding. And I was searching for a group that I really needed at the time. So I remember I went into the center on Mills, and I remember asking them, is there an LGBT group here that I could become a part of? And they're like, no, but you can start your own. And I kind of chuckled. I'm like, oh, sure, no. But then later I'm like, wait a minute, I actually could start my own, and maybe I should. So I did the research, and I reached out to people in the community, and I became the founder of the Butterfly Talks, and it actually became one of the most successful groups at the center, but it was mainly for women in the LGBTQ community. So it was really more of a social group, but I had to call it support group. But it was more of a social group, and I had speakers that came in once a week and talked to everybody, and we would always go out afterwards. And I tried to build that community that I just didn't have. And I'm so happy I did it, but it did turn into a point where I wasn't equipped to handle it anymore, just because I started to see there was such a big need for it. And people were struggling mentally really bad. And I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist or anything clinical. So I knew I have to turn it over to somebody that can professionally help them. And I turned it over to the Mental Health Association a couple years ago, and that's as far as I know where it went.
So well, I can share with you where it's gone.
I'd love to know, yeah.
It's helped to create or be a part of our peer support community, and something that we call our Reflections program. And within that, we are still today doing, now of course virtually, a number of different peer-to-peer support and recovery groups that are supported here at the association. And so I can share with you that it may not look specifically like what you had originally had as its first iteration at the center, but it continues to live on here at the association. And
that's awesome.
The team is really grateful. And that's why when I saw that, and I didn't realize when we connected how connected you really were here. So I wanted to thank you for that.
No, that's amazing. I'm so glad that it's still continuing. So thank you for giving me an update on that. I love it.
Yeah, in fact, after we're due with our Coping Together segment today, I'm going to connect you with Shawanda Henderson, who is the peer-to-peer recovery specialist that supports Reflections. And maybe you'd like to do a guest appearance.
Oh, I'd love to. Absolutely.
And
It'd be so nice to
going.
get back into it.
Exactly.
I would love to. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, again, believe it or not, that was a quick 30 minutes, wasn't it? Can you imagine? I think that
really was.
Well, I think because we enjoy each other's company and talking about this really important topic. You know, for the close, is there some things that you feel that you would really like the audience to impart with today, as you're moving forward in your journey of recovery, where you find yourself today, as you still unsure, are trying to manage with the issues that you find with your behavioral care condition and how things are going?
Absolutely. I would like to say to everybody, don't be a prisoner to your mind, because that is something that I'm guilty of. I still am guilty of. I work at it every day. But what I mean by that is, when you think of a prison mentality, you think of being trapped by your own challenges. And I want people to know that there is. And when you think of a prison mentality, think about being handcuffed to an idea, to a person, to a mental illness, to an addiction. And at the end of the day, we have the power. We've had the power all along. We've had that key all along. It's just a matter of unleashing that inside of you.
That is just really, it's an amazing story. I couldn't be, I want to say almost, I feel so proud to know you and to have you share your story with our audience today. And I know your origin story as it intersects here with the Mental Health Association. So thank you for that as well. Obviously, for individuals that are listening today that feel like they would like to make a connection and reach out, or feel that they're ready to take that step and unwrap the wrapper, they can definitely reach out here to the Mental Health Association. You can call us at 407-898-0110 or go online if you feel more comfortable making your first step without maybe being as intimate as a phone call. We're willing to help you in that regard as well. But to Liv's point, I think it's don't be afraid of unwrapping that Tootsie Roll and start licking in order to get to that chewy center. I just love that metaphor so much. And I really want to thank you, Liv, for sharing your story, for sharing your journey of recovery, and hopefully for being a light of resilience for somebody listening today that might have been struggling themselves, and by your story and sharing feels comfortable to pick up the phone. And if not, call the Mental Health Association, reach out to a friend and start that journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Remember to tune in back here for more Coping Together segments as we try to bring information and important elements of individuals in our community that have stories to share. If you have a story to share that you'd like, that you feel might be elemental and would like to come on to Coping Together, please reach out to the association and we'd be happy to connect with you. Liv, thank you so much. And I love that your first name is Liv. I think that is an appropriate way. I know it's Olivia, but that you've adopted Liv, and I'm so glad that you are. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It means so much to me. Thank you.